All right, welcome to the Is Anything Real Anymore edition, I think, of Legal Tech Week. It seems like the only thing that's still real is the billable hour, and we can talk about that a little bit. But everything else that's happening in law is all deep fakes and hallucinations and all sorts of other issues. So we've got lots of stuff to talk about today. It is May 16th, 2025. I'm Bob Ambrogi, and I have a blog called Law Sites and a podcast called Law Next. And let's do introductions. Niki, you want to kick us off?
I do. My name is Niki Black. I'm the Principal Legal Insight Strategist at Affinipay, parent company of my case, LawPay, CasePure, and DocketWise. I write legal tech columns for ABA Journal, Above the Law, The Daily Record, and I also oversee and author some industry reports that we put out on the Affinipay side of things. I see
All
Joe
right.
yawning at my intro. I know, it's the same thing every week.
I
No,
know, you haven't changed your title in like weeks. It's kind of getting boring. All right, Victor, how about you?
Speaking of not having my title changed for a long time, my name is Victor Lee. I am assistant managing editor for the ABA Journal. I noticed Stephanie's wearing her class shirt. I am wearing a old school Depeche Mode shirt. So
Nice.
All right, and Stephanie, what you?
Oh, hi. Yes, I'm Stephanie Wilkins. I am the director of content at Legal Tech Hub. And Victor, I saw recently that there is in Tallinn, Estonia, there is a Depeche Mode bar, a fully Depeche Mode themed bar. And so it was on my list before, and now it's on my list even more. So yes.
yeah, I'm there.
Yep. Round table, take it on the road.
Bob can pay for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, oh sure. With all the proceeds we make out of the show. And last but not least, Joe.
Joe Patrice from Above the Law and the Thinking Like a Lawyer podcast. I am here today. I've canceled my trip to the beach. Apparently, there are seashell formations that can get you in trouble there. I don't want to get disappeared. So,
Yeah, you're probably getting investigated already anyway, so it doesn't really
yeah.
matter. So actually, I was going to start off with one of the stories, but Stephanie, it did just occur to me that we didn't hear from you about CLOC. We heard from Steve last week about CLOC. I wondered quickly, what were your impressions?
Sure. It was overall, it was good. I'd only been one time before, which was 2 years before, so I can't compare it to a previous one at this venue. From what I heard, a lot of the sessions were really great. I didn't really go to anything but the keynote because I had meetings, as we are all want to not go to sessions, even if we would like to. Everyone said the networking was great. They do a lot of meetups and sort of brain dates and things like that. That's what they call them. But then once again, there was a
Brain
lot
dates.
of pushback about the vendor hall. Like I feel like that's a running theme with a lot of these conferences now, where it's it was like on a third level down, so you had to intentionally go to it. And I mean, people did, but like I just anecdotally walked around a lot and was like, how is the foot traffic been? And everyone was sort of like meh at best. I felt really bad for the startup alley, startup pub, startup, whatever they call it there. It was like, so the way it was, you walk in and there's the rows of booths this way and one row along the back facing towards you. And then behind that, facing the other direction that you don't even see, was the startup booth alley. So people didn't even know it was there. Like it was behind our booth and I didn't even originally know it was there. And it's not like you had lunch on the other side of that. Like the stage was there, but nothing, you had to go out of your way to go to that too. So I felt really bad for them. But yeah, then otherwise, I think a lot of people were just sort of like, great networking, great whatever. Foot traffic in the vendor hall, I'm not so sure about that. But Flowrida, I was the first to be like, really, Flowrida? It was amazing. I eat every word I said about that. Special surprise guest, Flavor Flav. Like, it was like, I don't know. I'm not a big Vegas fan, and that might be the most fun I've ever had in Vegas.
Yeah, even Steve had good reviews for that. So
Everyone,
Steve. When I
even
say
people that
even
were just like,
Steve, I don't
oh,
know what that means.
we'll go because it's free. I don't even know who these people are. I'm not saying that necessarily about Steve, but like
Yeah.
everyone had fun. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was surprisingly delightful. Yes.
So from years of us sitting on this show critiquing conferences, we should all like get together and organize a conference. It would be the perfect conference, right? Everything would be done right. We would
I
get
mean,
everything straight. I
we
mean,
can
Niki's
just
sort of doing
design.
that. You guys sort of do that too.
Do you know how much time and people power it takes to put on one of these things? I can't even tell you. It is so much work. There's no way the five of us could do it.
Oh no, having been inside at Legal Week and then even the smaller events at LTH now, it is so much work. But I would love to plan, like architecturally plan the dream exhibit hall and where it fits in with the rest of the conference. But yeah, so CLOC is at McCormick Place next year. I just saw that in the chat. Don't know what part of it. Don't know if it's 10-mile walk
Talk
away,
about the
5
dream
mile walk
exhibit
away.
hall,
But yes,
the
I
nightmare exhibit
find
hall.
it. I feel like for better or for worse, Vegas is part of CLOC's identity because all but the very first one have been there. So I think it's an interesting choice to start bouncing around. But yeah, McCormick Place.
Question from the audience: did anybody dance like Tom Cruise from Tropic Thunder?
I mean, yeah. Everyone danced like no one was watching.
Good, good. All right. Well, getting to the stories this week, we've got a bunch of stuff, but we've got lots of made up stuff. So maybe start with a deep fake out of Florida and a judge getting in some trouble around that. Victor, you want to tell us about that?
Yeah, so this was interesting. So there's a judge, Lauren Pfeffer, Pfeffer, I don't know, of Broward County. So this brings up a whole other batch of issues. So she was trying to get an endorsement from the South Florida Sun Sentinel when she ran in 2024, and that brings up a whole nother batch of issues about whether judges should be popularly elected or what they have to do to get endorsements and stuff like that. That be that as it may. So she cited there was an ebook with a fantastic title, by the way. It's The Ninth Circus Court of Florida: My 30-Year Job from Hell. See, I don't even know anything about it, but now I want to read that book. So I'm like, whoever came up with that title, kudos. They're talking about like it's full of profanity. There was lots of synonyms for like sex and other kinds of like things, all kinds of terrible things. It said a lot of judges were corrupt and incompetent and blah blah blah. And so this judge, when she was being interviewed by the paper, she cited this book even though she hadn't read it, and she also cited like a fake record, like a recording of like some people talking about it and some judges talking about it, but like that recording turned out to be fabricated. And so the recording is fabricated, likely using computer manipulation and or generative AI. And so yeah, so she got cited for the by the Florida Judicial Qualifications Commission, and so she's facing ethical charges for not properly vetting the recording and things like that. And then of course, obviously, this brings up a whole bunch of other issues about generative AI and what we've been talking about on the show, the reliability of it, and if judges are getting fooled by this kind of stuff, it's just probably not going to be the last judge that this happens to. Not necessarily not necessarily in that context, but maybe in other contexts relating to the law and they're doing their job. They had the fact that the fact that she didn't really go out of her way to well, she's being accused of not going out of her way to like vet the recording. That also kind of brings up a lot of other problems about not just generative AI, but also the whole system of like how we select judges in this country or in certain states. So I thought it was interesting. It touched on a lot of different issues, ethical issues and whatnot. And yeah, I mean, be careful when you get these recordings. I mean, if it sounds too good to be true, right? It probably is.
So how do you, I read about that story and I wrote, I included a little blurb of it in my daily record column that I just submitted, but how are you supposed to vet deepfake videos? I mean, is Snopes tracking them all? Like who's tracking all the videos that are deepfakes and not? Like, how do you do that? I mean, I think and I think it's going to be harder and harder to do it over time. Maybe she should have known, but like, at what point are we supposed to vet everything before we talk about it? And I agree there's a higher standard of care there. She's a judge running for office, but still, I think it's an interesting issue and it's going to become a lot harder to do over time as these really improve. And it's
Wasn't
hard
part
to
of the problem in this one that she hadn't even watched the video, and if you had watched it, it's like had you checked your citations, you might have had some questions about your citations. If you'd watched the video, you might have had some questions because there was like it was not the one where the judge was saying something about talking about another judge wanting to get buried under the Lincoln Memorial with a prostitute next to him or something like that. It was like very unlikely that a judge would have said that on a video.
As
like,
one
That
does.
escalated quickly.
there's something about solid gold coffin too. But I'm like, but no, I could see some judge wanting to do that though.
Okay. I guess. All right.
But over
Yeah.
time, I mean, the deep fakes, it's so easy for AI to make these deep fakes. And then they get released so fast. I mean, it's like the internet's already becoming so spammy. Even Reddit is becoming full of AI spam. So, so there's no way Snopes or sites like that are going to be able to keep up and let you know which one is a deep fake and which isn't. So I think I agree in this situation. It's more like the slippery slope here. Like, at what point are we going to be expected to vet all these things?
You got to start with the smell test, right? Does it pass that one?
Am I the only one that like thinks that
No,
it
I
could be
mean,
hard?
I think,
I-
no, I agree with you. They're getting super advanced. I mean, at a very minimum, you should watch it. But yeah.
I agree because if they've been more subtle, just been like, just like having judges not maybe go over the top, but just say something that's bad, but still somewhat within the bounds of what actual judges might say to each other. Yeah, I can see, and I mean, I can see all kinds of ways for this to be misused in like a political campaign. Like, oh, so and so met with this shady character and did this and blah blah blah, and here's the recording. So yeah, I mean, there's totally ways that people can take advantage of this.
All right, but wait a
When
minute.
you
You're
look
telling
at
me the judges don't say off-color things to each other? Maybe not on video, but I don't think that they're exactly,
Never.
altar boys. Well,
sure, but
that's the wrong
like
analogy, I don't
this
know.
Alter women.
this was
Alter
a whole
people.
different situation though, right? Because the book, like the author of this book that they're choosing to cite, I mean, it looks crazy. Like it just gives crazy vibes. So before we even get into whether or not the AI looks good, I mean, it's a step away from QAnon looking, this book. So
So you're saying
maybe
it's giving crazy is our first
it's
test.
giving big crazy.
Okay.
All right,
Okay.
go with that test. Well, and of course, another answer is to make sure that judges get training in deep fakes and AI, like a lot of law firms are getting training in AI so that they don't have any problems with like hallucinated cases or anything like that. Like K&L Gates, I know has had training in this, and that's a good thing, right, Joe?
Yeah, it works. It totally works. No problems there. So this is a big. We're gonna
That
have
was a stretch,
We're gonna
right?
have we're gonna have a long hallucination talk. I think. But we'll begin here. K&L Gates, also working with Ellis George, the LA trial attorneys. They got tagged for 9. It was something like 9 out of 27 citations were made up in their brief filing. The special master called them out for it. They're being sanctioned $31,000. We'll put a pin in the amount because I want to get back to that, but before we get to that, I will also say this week was big in a lot of ways. Latham is now in trouble for putting in some hallucinations. Bob's going to talk in a second about another firm that has some hallucination issues. And I'll throw in, this is one that I'm breaking right now, I guess, because I got the tip for it like 5 seconds before we went on. But an order to show cause was just issued about Butler Snow over the fact that they made up all their stuff in a thing that was filed in Alabama, I think, earlier today.
Breaking hallucination news. I love
Yeah,
it.
just breaking hallucinations. So it's everywhere. And I guess the only other thing that I would add, just to kind of foreground the conversation about the extent of the sanction, is the other side in the K&L Gates case asked for more, like to have all the fees for their having to respond to the made-up motion covered. And the judge said no, because, that's not really needed for deterrence. And it got me thinking about when we started all of this a couple years ago, when we, had this Avianca situation. And at that time, the slap on the wrist made a little bit of sense. They were like a small firm trying to figure things out. They didn't really know any better. They should have, but they were the first. At this point, I think it's safe to say no, they aren't getting deterred by these sanctions.
Okay.
You kind of need to make them way worse.
It was only 2 weeks ago that I got on my soapbox with my column and came on the show and went on a rant about how what will ever be the final straw, and everyone was like, well, not everyone knows as much as we do, blah 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 blah.
That's
I mean,
true. That's
I'm just
true.
gonna keep pulling out that soapbox because now it's even more sophisticated firms with training. Like,
Right.
I don't know.
And I think
crossed
that's the
permanently out.
and I think that's the distinction going back to your original story that like I think we all speaking for myself, I was a little bit more in my head, I was still thinking of the stories of these like small solos who don't quite understand that Chat GPT is not the same as other kinds of. On the other hand, let's put that's another side of this conversation. The in this case, they were not using consumer-facing low-grade GPT stuff. They were using what's we've been kind of telling people, oh, you're fine if you use one of these better systems, or
We
not
never
fine,
said
but
you're
you're
fine. We
right.
said you're better. And we've also said repeatedly
Right.
that LLMs hallucinate. It is what they do.
Right. Mansplaining as a service, as we say. But that, and now we're getting into the situation where it's that. And I think in my head, I've always thought about the sanction situation as well. Not everybody's as tech plugged in if they're like running a 3-lawyer firm in Bumbleton. But now we're talking about, well, Latham is on this list, right? Like we're now talking about the most powerful firms in the country
Actually
using
representing an
sophisticated stuff.
AI company. And
Yeah, yeah. Like
but in the K&L Gates one, I mean, that's part of what made that so outrageous was that the judge pointed out to the lawyers that there were 2 cases that appeared to be hallucinated. The lawyers checked those 2 cases and discovered, yes, they were hallucinated, and then sent the brief or whatever it was back to the judge saying, don't worry, we've checked all the other cases. This was an associate at K&L Gates telling the judge, don't worry,
Or
now they're on
Marissa.
notice, there's hallucinations. We checked the rest, and they didn't check the rest. The other ones were hallucinated.
But
It's
so
just
do you,
Yeah,
outright lying
I
or
mean,
something.
well, so for the ones that were using paid services, and we won't say which paid services, at least I'm not going to right now, but because we don't even know for sure that that's what they were using, I don't think. But if they're using
Well, the
paid,
attorney said they used
all right,
co-counsel Westlaw, I'll say it, and Google Gemini, but we
all
don't
right,
know which ones generated. They didn't say which ones
right.
generated the cases.
But for the paid legal, so let's just, for the purpose of a hypothesis, assume that someone using, some of these companies have used, firms have used paid legal research tools, that they've paid for, like CoCounsel or Lexis Plus AI. And most of these companies say something like 99.9% accuracy, right? For their legal research. Do you think, and they all have disclaimers, right? You have to carefully review it. Do you think that there's going to come a point where those disclaimers aren't going to cut it when they're alleging accuracy rates that high and there may be potential malpractice claims, or no?
Well, that was my biggest, not my biggest, but one of my huge problems when that Stanford HAI study came out. And then they were, like they test those research tools. That study aside, at the time, and I honestly haven't looked, I hope they still don't, Lexis had like that tag hallucination free. And I'm like, you just can't, and like they had a definition of that, but like that's just reckless, I think. Like hopefully they have changed that. So yeah, I mean, yes,
Because
that's
there are
where I
Well,
also
then
a lot of
ranting about this
companies that
topic.
are not rolling this there. It is hard to do that right. And there are a lot of companies making decisions. That's why everything's slowed down to not necessarily roll those deep embedded functionalities out because there are hallucinations and because you've got this obligation to your customers to do it right. And if you can't do it right because the tools aren't there yet, maybe maybe like it shouldn't be happening. I'm not sure. I'm just wondering, like, at what point do you think these large, especially these large firms, can turn around in these high stakes cases and be like, hey, there's some kind of liability. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's, we got a legal malpractice claim against us, so we're going to, bring you guys in to indemnify us. Or, I mean, I have done no research on this, but do you think there's a potential for claims like that or something? And as if this keeps sort of
Ask
going.
ChatGPT, it'll tell you.
I
I
think they
don't
are
know.
going to have to be more like their caveats, their warnings, whatever, are probably going to have to be stronger. I mean, it's kind of like the Darwin Awards, right? Where like suddenly you had to there has to be a warning, a label that says cruise control is not autopilot because someone used it that way and died, and then therefore going forward they had to do that. Or like warning, coffee is hot. Like so yeah, I mean, to a degree, it's kind of, I think it's a little bit ridiculous, but I think there's an in between where they probably are going to have to be more explicit in their I don't know.
And I don't mean
And
to pick
Well,
on
the sanction needs to be bigger because, like, let's face it, $31,000 for K&L Gates, that's pocket change. Most of these guys, they spend more than that on their wardrobe, right? So it's like that's nothing, and they didn't get any kind of they didn't get any kind of like I mean I don't even most of the stories that I saw didn't even name the lawyers; they just named the firms, and that's not going to affect the firm. I mean, the firm is so big and so well known and have so entrenched. People aren't going to be like, oh, K&L Gates, I'm not going to hire them because they had an associate who screwed up this one case, and that's not going to happen. So they're not really going to pay a price for this. So I mean, you need to have something with a little bit more teeth if you're gonna sanction these lawyers and have it be effective. But what I'm wondering is that, like, I mean, the whole like with the whole not naming these lawyers and whatnot. I feel bad for those initial lawyers from New York, the ones that got the ones who are credited for like being like the first ones to do it, even though I doubt they're the first ones. But like that
Schwartz
LaDuca,
and
yeah, LaDuca and that other guy. Yeah, I mean, so it's like, how are they going to feel? Because like when it happened with them, everyone was like, oh, these people, how could they do something like this and blah blah. Now it's like a lot of other people have done it, including people who make a lot more money than them and have a lot more so-called prestige. It's like, well, yeah, how like so we've been railing about these two lawyers, who did it like way back when, and now it's like they weren't the only ones. They're not going to be the last ones.
yeah. And honestly, $5,000 fine for them was probably way more impactful than
Oh yeah,
$31,000 fine for our big law firm.
yeah.
And I
it's
just want to be
interesting
really
though. I think I
clear.
wonder if go ahead.
Sorry. I just wanted to be really clear, almost like for the record, that I don't mean to be picking on the legal research tools. It's more like a hypothetical question that just as these things keep arising. I don't mean to pick on those specific companies. I didn't say Vincent. I probably should have included Vincent when I was talking about legal research. But I just want to be clear that I'm not really picking on those. I'm just talking about it more from a hypothetical standpoint. It's just something that was on my mind. I don't.
Yeah, they're currently asking ChatGPT whether they can sue you for defamation or something like that.
I also don't want to
But
pick on them. I think they're doing good stuff too, for sure.
I mean, it's also important to note that these so-called hallucinations take different forms, and we keep, some of these studies have tried to break down the fact that hallucinations can mean different things. The Latham case with the where they were representing Anthropic, it was like a citation in an expert report where it was a hyperlink, where if I understood it, the hyperlink was actually to the correct article, but it had misstated the name and the publication and everything else about the citation of the article. And so the lawyer had basically said, Claude, give me the citation for this article, and stuck it in. First of all, I've never heard anybody using Claude for legal research, so that was a first. But so it was like actually not wrong in some sense, but the citation was wrong. And the one I talked to, the one in Toronto, was the lawyer at that case, the lawyer again filed hallucinated cases. The judge at this point has just asked him to show cause why they shouldn't be sanctioned, so that's still pending. But I think it was actually a correct citation, and at least one of them was a correct citation, but cited for the exact opposite proposition. Like ChatGPT had said this case stands for X when it standed for the exact opposite of whatever they said. So it gets a little nuanced, I guess. But
I don't know. I feel like I'm usually not the like yay punishment route, but for this, we need something. I don't know. Whatever we're doing so far is not. No one's learning any lessons. I don't know.
hopefully someone is.
Well, yeah. I mean, maybe they are, and it could be a lot worse. Yes, but I don't know.
Yeah.
I agree with Maureen. I was thinking this too. That one that you just talked about, Bob, where the citation was incorrect. That's just like almost old school failing to check the citation, but they actually had done the research. Like failing to do an accurate cite. And I feel like that's less egregious than the failing to review output from these tools and determine whether it's actually accurate, versus asking it to give you a cite and the cite's wrong. Still not okay. You still should have checked an official resource, but I don't think that it's or official source, but I don't think that that's personally feels quite as egregious to me. It's almost more of an old school mistake versus an AI mistake.
Yeah, that's why I agree with you. It's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
It's a little more nuanced. It's not an outright
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
citation, but still, I don't know. Yeah, like the guy in chat says, why aren't people using friggin' software to check the sites? That they are, they're just using the wrong software. All right, so we'll stay tuned for next week's edition of what lawyer got in trouble for.
Now what did they do?
Now what did they do? Yeah, we do a regular. We could just do like a regular weekly show on this.
Yeah.
Nothing.
Should
Well,
be a
it's our
regular segment.
Yeah, well, it's like a weekly segment.
Lawyers behaving badly. It used to be, you know, simple things like stealing client funds or something. Now they're
Or
it's getting
forgetting
much
to
more
put your
complicated.
pants on in Zoom.
Or forgetting to put your pants on in Zoom. Yeah.
But that guy
If,
then
if
did
they
hallucinate
forgot,
pieces,
we
so
don't know
he's
that
come
they
back
forgot.
again.
We don't know that it wasn't intentional.
Yeah.
All right. So that takes us. What does that take us to? Well, there are a couple of different ways we can go, but there's a couple of different. Julie's not here. Julie wanted to talk about a report. I think maybe Julie's still going to join. I don't know. She was going to talk about.
Someone
might be
else had
late,
it listed
so-
too. What didn't
Yeah.
somebody else have that? You did.
Well,
though.
Joe had it too,
Oh,
and then
yeah.
you had, Nikki, some reports. So again, we've talked before about various reports coming out that are looking at lawyers' use of AI and various other aspects of law practice. And another one came out this week from Clio, and then Nikki, you went back and looked at a couple of them and kind of compared back to back what they showed. So I don't know. Maybe we should maybe Nikki. Maybe we start with yours, and then we can kind of back up into the Clio one and see how that kind of compares to what you were talking about.
Well, I'd read the 2025 Thomson Reuters 2025 Generative AI and Professional Services report that had just been released in mid-April, and there was a whole section of that that talked about lawyers as one of the professional services, and I wanted to see how. I noticed as I was reading it, because I'm intimately familiar with the Affinipay report because I wrote it, that some of the questions were very similar. And that's kind of a rarity that they're phrased in a similar way that you can compare the almost apples to apples data points. So I thought it would be interesting to compare those few questions that were very asked in a very similar way to see what the results were. With a caveat, which I pointed out with one of the takeaways when I compared it, the Thomson Reuters report definitely had a much larger percentage of large firms than the Affinipay report. But there were three, let me pop this into the chat if someone hasn't already done it. There were three points where the questions were very similar. Let me put this in the chat and then I'll, the first one was the Thomson Reuters report wanted to try to ascertain how many people are already using generative AI and how many are planning to use it in the future, and how many were just researching. They wanted to know where they were in their phases. And we asked something very similar in the Affinipay report. So Thomson Reuters data showed that 28% of firms are already using Gen AI compared to 21%, which were using legal specific. Thomson Reuters didn't specify legal specific or not. Another 14% were planning to start using it in the future. And then they said 36% were researching it and 22% said they had no plans. We had a data point in ours where only 3% said they'll never use it. So I thought that was interesting. And that was AI in general, that specific question in our report. So it just sort of showed that a lot of firms are still figuring out how or if generative AI fits into their practice. And then when how many are actually using it versus individual, how many of those firms are actually using it versus their where they are in their planning phase. Thomson Reuters had that data in there in two different places, whether they were actually using it. Or sorry, how often they were using it daily, weekly, or whatever the case. For the people who are actually using it, how often do you use it? Thomson Reuters said 12% said they're using it multiple times a day. Our report said 45% said they use it every day. 21% said they use it, Thomson Reuters said they use it daily compared to our 45%. Most of the Thomson Reuters people fell into the weekly, 36, and 6 said occasionally. So that showed that there was a significant difference across those two surveys about how many were using it daily. And but even so, it still shows that once people do start using it, they engage with it fairly frequently, even if it's not every day, depending on which report you're looking at. And then how they're using it was another question where there was a cross section between the reports. And this one was where the firm size, I think, came into play. The Thomson Reuters report had a significantly higher base of larger firm users. And so the top legal use cases were doc review, legal research. Both of those were in the mid 70s, 77, 74. Summarizing docs also 74, followed by drafting briefs at 59, contract drafting at 58. And then in our report, it showed a broader range of lighter touch use cases that were not necessarily that were the less confidential information was required for the use case. So they're using it to draft correspondence, 54%, 47% for brainstorming, 46% for general research, and some said they would use it for core legal tasks. Only 40% said they draft docs, and 38% for legal research. So I think that sort of ties back to some of the stuff that we were just talking about. The larger firms have these more expensive research tools rolled out that have AI available, and they're rolling it out in that way because it's embedded in these platforms, just at a certain tier level. So they're using it for these more specific legal use cases that require confidential information or reliable output, whereas the smaller firms, I think, don't yet have access to those for either financial reasons, or they are just still trying to, they're just using the free versions, again, I think for financial reasons. And so they're using it for the tasks that require, that are a little bit less risky, if you will. So I thought that was interesting. And then the rest of the article just pulled some interesting data points from just the Thomson Reuters, that they covered some billing rate information, which was how people thought it would impact billing, and whether it would impact billing rates. And over half said they didn't think that it would. I think they're wrong. On the cost side, 42% plan to absorb Gen AI expenses. 30% said they'll pass at least some on to clients, which I thought was interesting. And then how important was it in the hiring process? I thought this was very interesting. Despite growing use, only 21% of firms saw it. AI knowledge is nice to have. 34% said it's not required at all. And the rest aren't really sure if they have, are unsure, or they don't have plans to hire staff in 2025. So it was interesting to see that even though a lot of them are kind of all in some ways, or at least using AI to an extent, they're not really prioritizing it in their hiring. So I thought that was kind of interesting too. So it was just interesting to kind of compare across the two reports. And I think I learned a lot from doing that because, there's so many of them coming out and they all have really valuable data.
So I did a month ago, I did the similar thing, but I was lazy, so I had ChatGPT do it. I compared Smokeball and your survey and the ABA survey and the Thomson Reuters survey. And the one thing that's a little different in the one, I was just looking back at that one, the one thing that's a little bit different from what you were just saying is that all three of the surveys, other than AffiniPays, actually showed legal research to be the dominant use case for the AI tools. The ABA survey said that, Smokeball survey said that, and the Thomson Reuters survey said that. But the numbers were kind of all over the place. The ABA said, they said the legal research is the dominant application for AI, used by 35% of respondents. So that's not a lot of lawyers using it for that. But the Smokeball survey found 78%, which is kind of in line with what Thomson Reuters found. So I don't know, I think interestingly, your survey was the most comprehensive in terms of numbers of people surveyed. And so I don't know whether that makes it perhaps more reliable or more credible or not. I'm not a surveyor, I don't know how that plays out, but it certainly seems to me that the more people you talk to, the more likely it's reflective of what's actually going on. But
It's also the question, that's the really hard thing about surveys is in ours, it said choose any that apply. So how are you using it? And you got to make multiple choices. And others may say, what's your top use case? In which case you're going to have very different results in some ways. So that's the problem with the challenge with comparing, first of all, drafting the surveys, and then the challenge and writing about them, and then comparing them across surveys. Because if they say just choose one, what's your top use case versus choose all the ways you're using it, you're gonna have very different outputs, I think. Maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah.
That's one of
No,
the,
I think that's real. That used to be one of the problems with the ABA tech survey that I think they've kind of addressed it and fixed it. But it used to be for years they were using basically the same survey after year. So it'd be like, what's your favorite, what's your top practice management program or something? And they would be listing these practice management programs for the 1940s or something that nobody uses anymore. And then so you'd get this like weird result out of the survey, making it look like people were using these things that nobody's using anymore. But I don't think they do it that way anymore because I haven't seen those kinds of results in a while. But for a while, it was definitely an issue. Anyway, so Clio, Joe, do you want to talk about that? You came at it from a little different aspect than the AI use more, but
Yes, I did. So my take on it was billable hour related, just because they did spend some time in the report talking to folks, because they have a lot of data from users as well as they run surveys and so on to supplement it. And they had a bunch of interesting data about how firms are billing. And their take on in the report itself, it kind of says that, the billable hour is still kind of reigning supreme, which is true and not unexpected. But what was interesting was how high the firms that use alternative fees are and flat fees are. When you added together the subscription model and flat fees, you were starting to get the flat fee, I think, was over 70% of the firms in the small law section, and in the solo section, and in the small and big law sectors, it was still over 2/3. Meaning, yeah, it's not being used for everything, but I don't think we would have expected numbers to be quite that high historically. And it struck me as though this is just I took my title as like it's dying slowly, almost as though it's billing by the hour. But it is true that there's kind of a we're starting to see more experimentation in these areas. We've heard, we always talk about how we've heard a lot of talk about this stuff for years, but this is where we actually see some numbers to
just
back
on
up
cue, here's
that
Julie.
they're
We were
doing
just
it.
talking
Yeah.
about the Clio thing.
So yeah, so that was my interesting take on it, was that I think we are seeing progress on that front.
Welcome, Julie.
Hi everyone, Julie Sobowale, legal journalist here in Canada. I'm just coming from a photo shoot for cookies for a friend who's a baker. Yeah, that's what I was doing. So,
For cookies.
I
Were
had
you
to
like
cook.
holding the cookie and
I
eating the
I had
cookie?
to, yeah, I had to eat some of them, and just
What a
had to take one
shame.
for the
What a
team.
tough job.
Yes, but I showed up just in time to talk about Clio and the report, didn't I?
Well, yeah. So we had been talking about, Niki had a story about comparing the Thomson Reuters survey and the AffiniPay survey they had done a few weeks ago about AI use. And then we kind of segued over to the Clio small firm survey they came out with this week. And Joe talked more about the kind of the billable hour side of it. So I know you had taken a look at it too. Did anything kind of jump out at you? I think you look more at the AI usage part of it.
Yeah, I thought that was really interesting because I think what Clio was trying to say is because smaller firms tend to have more flat fees, that they would actually have more time to kind of integrate AI into it for kind of like that document review and other things, because they already kind of figured out their workflows in order to do flat fees. But we see in the data that's not actually how it's working out. And I think this kind of comes back to the conversations we've been having over the last few weeks of like, well, who's actually on this AI train? Because we've been talking, and I feel like myself, I've been writing about AI for years now, particularly ChatGPT and Copilot and all these things. But I think there's still a disconnect here. I think some people still need help in AI adoption. That's kind of what I was seeing in the numbers, because it's not a small discrepancy between
Mhm.
small and medium-sized firms and usage. And really there's the most benefit I would think would come from small firms because they actually have, first of all, they're a little bit more nimble to bring something in quicker, but also if they don't have the education or tools to do it effectively, they're probably even more risk averse than mid or large size firms to adopt it.
It's interesting on the billable hour point. I heard this secondhand at CLOC. I mean, because I wasn't in a lot of the discussions or the sessions, but a general sense that I did hear someone say is that, I mean, no one's declaring the billable hour dead, but they thought, as opposed to past years, as like Joe was saying, people are more amenable to at least considering or opening up the discussion to alternative fee arrangements or things like that, which, is, there was a lot of caveats in what I said, but I mean, some sense for a topic like that, it is progress. And I had forgotten that until you just said that.
Yeah, I had written this week about, well, I guess I had a podcast this week. Jim Del Cousis, who's the founder and CEO of Pursuit, which was in the news last week for acquiring Apereo, but Pursuit is like this platform that helps corporate legal departments select and manage outside counsel and price matters and all of that. And he said that something like 70, I think he said in the interview, I'm not seeing it here, but something like 70% of the matters flowing through their platform are in some way fixed fee or set fee. They're not billable matters. Now his platform is kind of designed to encourage that kind of billing and to help law firms figure out how to price that kind of billing. So that's not a representative sample, but
if you can't place them, if you've ever been to a conference a couple years ago and people with the whole Kill Bill, Uma Thurman yellow tracksuit vibe, that was Pursuit.
right, okay,
Kill
right,
Billable
right,
hours was their
right,
thing. They didn't have it
right.
this year. I talked to him about it. He's like, we had to retire it finally. But yeah, so if you ever saw Kill Bill, Uma Thurman,
Right.
yeah, that was Pursuit.
Yeah, okay.
I'm gonna need photos at some point just to verify the stories.
We're gonna need photos of those cookies or samples maybe.
Yeah, if we want to verify your absence, your delinquency, Julie.
It's like Julie's off eating cookies, Caroline's off always going to some party or something somewhere, and here we are slaving away here at the Legal Tech Week.
It
Last
makes
week
me
I was
hopeful,
just
though.
asleep.
If we ever have to leave the country, it sounds like it's fun going somewhere else. There's a lot of more fun things going on over there.
Canada for sure.
Right. It's a short drive.
Yeah. All right. So, Stephanie, did you mentioned you didn't put anything in the log, I don't think, but you mentioned something you had wanted to talk about last week. Had you been here last week, which was this AI firm kind of thing? Do you
Yeah,
want
I
to talk
think
about
I
that?
had it just hit my radar last week, but yes, yes,
Do you
I
have
was
it? I mean, if
the
you're
link.
prepared to talk about it, or do you want to just?
Yeah, no, I wrote my column on it this week. I will loop it in
Oh,
there.
okay.
Yeah, so this, nope, I can send it to not just you guys. Let's start with that. Master the chat. Yeah, so this Garfield law, Garfield AI, there's been a lot of buzz about it because the Solicitors Regulatory Authority of England and Wales, it's the first time, everyone believes it's the first time anywhere anyone's granted an authorization for them to operate as a regulated law firm and provide legal services primarily through artificial intelligence. So there was a lot of buzz about this. Ultimately, my takeaway is that it's not as crazy as impressive as it sounds, but the fact that it was granted regulatory authorization, I think, is the part here that people are saying, does this open a door to something else? Because basically what it is an AI platform, and they mostly focus on like debt recovery, debt collections, things that people, the smaller amounts, like up to 10,000 pounds, I think it is, or something that usually go uncollected. And you can do like, for $2 get a chaser letter, or for $7.50 this sort of thing. And there's one lawyer, there's one regulated solicitor at the firm who is responsible. The buck stops with him. In fairness, most of the activities they do don't really count as regulated legal services, like sending those letters or things like that. But if they ever do court filings or actual client advice that is, and it goes to this guy, and he is the one who is responsible for it and is responsible for overseeing everything. So yeah, very, I mean, low stakes, not anywhere near like a large firm doing something like this, but as far as I could tell, and most people have said, and it's the first regulatory body to approve something like this. So the question then is, does this at least crack the door open ever so slightly to more access to justice use, or a little bit of a dent on, the UPL, the staunch UPL crowd? It's just, I don't know. It's something that sounds flashier in headlines than it is, but it's still interesting.
So that's a little bit like do not pay, doesn't it? I mean, like it generates the forms that you fill in and then stuff files it in court. I mean,
Yeah, it very much is kind of like but it's very focused on a single thing. So, but yeah, it's not unlike that at all.
It makes me think of someone left a comment on one of my posts, someone who's not in the legal space on LinkedIn. And what she said was telling, I think. She said, and I don't think it really had a lot to do. I was writing about AI, but I can't remember what the post was. Maybe it was a newsletter of mine. But she said, I just used ChatGPT as my lawyer to get me through a family court proceeding that's been going on for 5 years. It was way better than any lawyer I've ever had, and it actually helped me get the case settled to my satisfaction. I was like, oh no, the bell tolls. Like,
I think I saw that comment and was like, I'm backing out of the room. I'm not going to get involved.
I didn't respond to her because I think it was an old one, and I just know, and I liked it, I think, but I just think that it is telling. If she's telling the truth, I mean, who knows? But well, what does she have? She's not. It's not like she isn't. I doubt she's an investor in OpenAI. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm pretty sure that this is what she's done, and that was a pretty glowing recommendation for ChatGPT as your lawyer, despite all the issues that we all know that it has at this time with the handling legal issues. Sounded like it did a bang up job for her. So, I don't
But
know.
this brings us back to the top of our show of people behaving badly and who did what this week.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, we have a new one of those of, lawyers getting caught with. I don't know if you guys talked about this Canadian case of another.
No, we didn't do the Canadian one, but we talked about a couple of the big law firm ones being
Yeah,
nabbed.
I talked briefly about the Canadian one, but
Yeah.
we didn't get into it much.
Yeah, I mean,
Out of
I'm
Toronto,
with
yeah.
you, Stephanie. I don't think this story it's attention grabbing, but the actual work has been there, done that. But I don't know, like I just think we're normalizing the fact that some consumers and other folks are going to be like, nope, I'd like the machine, thank you. We'll skip the person. Yeah.
I mean, the access to justice point is fair. Like, if you can actually get people to just generate a letter for $5, then that gets their landlord off their back. But doing it like I mean, I guess you could get ChatGPT to do that, but I don't know. I mean, I get that point. I think it's a very small point. I mean, I would love it to grow into a bigger point, but yeah, but I mean, someone did something regulatory in that direction. So that was basically the TLDR of my column.
Yeah. I just, for the information on people listening to this, I posted today, this morning, but it's actually started yesterday. But I'm apparently co-sponsoring a survey that's being done to try and determine to the extent to which generative AI is being used by legal aid, nonprofits, and others to enhance access to justice. And the survey is being conducted by the National Legal Aid and Defender Association, Paladin, the legal tech company, and Everlaw for Good, which is the sort of the charitable part of the e-discovery company Everlaw. So I'll put the link in the chat. If anybody knows anybody who's in legal aid or nonprofit law, and might be good to send the survey to them so they can take part in it. All right, I didn't really have much very exciting to talk about this week myself, I hate to say. I thought the most interesting thing I wrote about this week was this kind of Trellis um, partnership with the law firm Fisher Phillips to sort of use generative AI to kind of quickly provide lawyers with more information about lawsuits that get filed about their clients. And I mean, basically the deal there is, Trellis is this state court litigation database. They've got a bunch of, they cover like 40, 46, 47 states now. And last year they launched a couple of AI products that can kind of take a case and kind of prepare this whole sort of strategy brief for a lawyer by comparing this case against all the other cases in their database and analyzing what's happened with them and making recommendations about timelines and how to pursue different things. It's sort of like litigation analytics on steroids combined with Gen AI, combined with docket research. It's a kind of a cool tool. But so now Fisher Phillips is this big employment law, international employment law firm. They get, through a different company altogether, they get these alerts come in all the time for new cases filed against their clients or against prospective clients that they're following. And they're basically just new case filed, name of case and some basic information. So now they've set up this automation so these new case alerts get sent over to Trellis and get sent back from Trellis with this whole AI enhancement built around it. So it gives you all sorts of information about the judge, if a judge has been assigned, the parties, the possible strategy, possible areas to explore in depositions and discovery. It's a really cool little thing, and of course it can continue to be further enhanced as the case moves along. So as there's more information, the AI can you can kind of push these matters back to Trellis, and they'll continue to flesh out this report as it goes forward. So that was an interesting use of generative AI, and one that kind of not just for sort of straight research, but it's kind of more a strategic vehicle for helping lawyers get ahead on a case that they've just gotten.
If we have a minute to kill, it looks like we might. Is there something else we're going to talk about or no?
I thought you'd want to spend like 10 minutes talking about what I just talked about, but what's so funny about that?
Niki was not having it, apparently. She's like, are you done now? Can I?
Bob, we're not going to talk about your story.
I was trying to be helpful. That's not really how I meant it. And then I'm like, that's something that caught my eye that we could like.
Yeah, no, yes.
All right, I didn't mean to be. I wasn't being.
Catch us up. No, I'm joking. I'm joking. You know that.
There was a New York Times article. I included in my newsletter this week about radiologists and AI. I don't know if any of you saw it, but it was super interesting. Why it caught my eye was people have been, before generative AI came along, everyone was predicting the radiology is going to be one of the first practice areas to die in the medical space because AI can do its job so well. And it's really interesting to read how AI has been used in that field and how it has ultimately, over time, proven to be a tool that makes their jobs more interesting and gets the grunt work off their plates. And so I thought it was an interesting and sort of analogize that potentially to what would this look like in legal. Because and my brother-in-law's radiologist, and I was talking to him a couple of weeks ago. I have knee surgery coming up, and I made him look at my MRI. And I asked him how AI was being impacted in his field. And I said, but before you go, let me predict. This is what I think they should do. I hope this is what they're doing. And it turns out that what I said was part of how they're rolling it out. And they talk about it in this article. And I'm glad this is what they're doing. What the AI is doing is putting at the top of their piles the things that it's found something on, but it doesn't tell them. It just says, look at this one first, because they found something on it that's notable and needs to be looked at. So it doesn't box them into oh, this is what it is and it's nothing else. Because radiologists are really interesting. They've done studies that they're one of the only professions where, when you do those, I don't know if I've talked about this already, so you can stop me if I did, but the optical illusions where like the squares are all different colors, but they're surrounded by a different color square, and so they look different sizes and everyone thinks they're different sizes. Radiologists have the highest accuracy rates of being able to tell, and even when they're slightly bigger than the other, And they have those other things around it that make it really confusing. They have really high accuracy rates on telling when they're the exact same size, when they're slightly bigger, and they never get fooled by the optical illusion at the rate that most people do. So then that's partly because all they do is look at these screens and look at all and try to find things in those images. But so the it's set up so that it doesn't prevent them from doing that creative thinking around what could it be, only that there's maybe something here because it's at the top of the pile. So they look at it more closely. But I think, or else that's just the first thing they look at to get off their plate to confirm, kind of. But I thought it was really interesting just to see how it, in fact, there's a radiology shortage still, even with all of this help. And so that's, bodes well for lawyers, despite that person making that comment on my LinkedIn post. So we'll have to see how it goes. But
I can't, yeah, I can't wait to read this article actually. Like I've always wondered and I've never found it, but like I've seen these studies about comparing, the AI versus the human radiologist and whatever. And I'm like, how do you get in that study? Because like I would, put my AI money where my AI mouth is, right? Like I'm like 5 years out of cancer now. I wouldn't do it year one, but I would like love to be part of a study like that. But even the way you said, so if anyone knows how to do that, let me know. But even the way you said putting the more important things up top, like I remember when it was a couple of years ago, I think it was, you were there, Bob, we were at the Harvard AI thing and they had all those Massachusetts judges there.
Yeah.
And they were even saying like, even for things like emergency eviction appeals, it would be really great if the AI could even like sort them and put the most likely, the most pressing and the most likely successful ones at the top. And then to get to the rest, because they just couldn't get through, like 125 in a day. So, I mean, I think the parallel is strong.
And you know that out of that has developed a couple of different programs where one of them was out of Suffolk, and I think Pablo's working with them on something else out of co-counsel. But Suffolk has worked with those judges to create
Yeah.
this AI-driven portal to help pro se litigants file those appeals directly themselves using AI to help generate the documents. Also reminds me a little bit of the old days of e-discovery when people used used AI to identify the most important documents to look at. I mean, you've got 20,000 or 20 million or whatever documents to look at, and AI says, okay, look at these first because these are the ones that look like they're probably the most relevant to what you're looking for. And that was machine learning. That wasn't Gen AI, but similar to that. All right. Well, that was good. You distracted people from my story, so we don't have to talk about that. And now that we're out of time,
that's how I roll. That's the kind of person I am,
all right. Anything else? Any other
What's the
good
next conference
radiology?
what's the next conference anyone's going to?
I'm going to Adirond in Dallas this week. Flying down Monday and coming back Wednesday, just a couple days. But
I was supposed to speak at the ABA's professional ethics and professionalism conference at the end of the month, but my surgery got moved up because my knee's been wonky recently, so I had to bail out. So ILTA for me.
The National Canadian, like our Canadian Association of Journalists conference is at the end of this month. So I will be there speaking and moderating a few panels about, why journalism is still important to democracy. Not just a light topics. Yeah.
I don't think we're having that panel in America.
No. Probably ILTA. I'm still toying with whether or not I can try to go to AALL, but
yeah, I'm going to go to
ILTA's
AAA.
probably.
Yeah, I'm gonna hit Legal Geek in Chicago next month, and then I think ILTA. I'm not sure.
All right. Well, if you're looking for us, that's where you can find us, or you can just come back here next Friday afternoon and find us here, hopefully. All right. See you all then. Have a good week, everybody.
Take care.
Bye, everyone.